They say Wagner came to Mali to fight terrorism. But you don't send 4,000 elite insignia-marked soldiers just to chase men in turbans. This isn't a counter-terror mission. This is a line drawn in the sand, a move on a much larger chessboard. Mali is no longer just a country. It's a place where silence speaks louder than diplomacy, where modern empires test each other's resolve through presence and posture. On paper, Russia offers security. But beneath the surface, in the hidden corridors where strategy trades in oil and minerals, a different motive is at play. The West sharpens its narratives. America keeps a close eye on Nigeria. China protects its crucial supply chains. And Russia, bolder since the campaign in Kyiv, makes the first move. This conflict won't begin with explosions. It will begin with boots on the ground. And those boots have already landed. If you're watching this, you're not just an observer. You're part of the shift. According to sources in Bamako and independent monitors, more than 4,000 fighters under the Wagner banner, now rebranded as the African Corps, are deployed across Mali. This marks Moscow's largest military footprint in Africa since it redeployed forces from Ukraine. So why now? Officially, the mission is counterterrorism. But a different logic connects Mali to Moscow, Nigeria to Beijing, and the entire Sahel to interests far older than any ideology. When convoys of hydrocarbons move, armed escorts follow. When power shifts on the continent, someone always moves first. The Wagner presence in Ukraine proved that the myth of the mercenary was reborn, then dispersed, redirected, and reorganized. Wars don't just vanish, they evolve. Now, in the red dust of the Sahel, that same shadow returns, not scattered, but refocused, wearing a new badge and carrying a new mandate. Their arrival was deliberate and highly visible. Armored personnel carriers, mounted guns, and supply columns protected like treasure. Not a single shot was fired, yet the message was unmistakable. The Sahel is not empty space. It is a corridor of resources, ideas, and alliances stretching from the Atlantic to the Red Sea. Whoever controls it helps shape Africa, and whoever shapes Africa reshapes the global order. Moscow knows this, and this isn't charity. Let's rewind briefly. When Wagner's priorities shifted to the fierce clashes in Ukraine, they pulled back from Africa. Now, as the Eastern Front stabilizes, Russia is picking up the tempo in other theaters. Mali isn't just getting a trickle of advisors back, it's receiving a visible, substantial force. Something has changed. Somewhere between intelligence cables and satellite feeds, a decision was made that West Africa is no longer on the periphery. Mali is the launch pad. Reports suggest this redeployment coincided with hydrocarbon shipments moving from neighboring ports to Bamako, all under armored escort. That convoy provoked no incident, and that was by design. It was a projection of power, not just protection. Everyone was watching. The larger play here is about Nigeria and the prize it represents: oil, gold, uranium, lithium, fertile markets, and strategic geography. Washington sees Nigeria as the linchpin of West Africa. Beijing sees it as a critical source of minerals for future tech and supply chains. For Moscow, any foothold there is leverage. If Nigeria is pressured or fractured, the entire Sahel could catch fire. A buffer in Mali buys time, influence, and bargaining power. This isn't simply counterterrorism. It's about creating a counterbalance. That's why their insignia are no longer hidden. The badge is meant to be seen because Mali isn't the end, it's the beginning. Pause for a moment and consider what this truly signals. If African states are finally going to choose their own partners rather than have them chosen, that process will be messy and contested. Mali's government, long treated as a pawn, appears to be acting like a player. By signing new security agreements and turning away from former patrons toward new ones, Bamako has rewritten its options. 4,000 foreign soldiers aren't just security contractors. They are a signal to allies and adversaries alike. Some call it reckless, many call it necessary. For communities that have watched foreign drone strikes rain down and foreign troops withdraw, this is as much about survival as it is about posture. Yet the risk is very real. The West is not standing idle. Sanctions, narrative campaigns, covert actions, and diplomatic pressure are tools that are already sharpened and ready to be used. Critics will say Russia is exploiting Africa. Supporters will say Moscow respects sovereignty where others have imposed solutions from the sky. And in a way, both are true. The key difference is that Moscow negotiates with governments that invite them in, rather than bombing states into compliance. The Wagner deployment forms the front line of a new doctrine, one some are calling African Sovereignty 2.0, where alliances are chosen and aid comes with fewer visible strings attached. The Wagner deployment forms the front line of a new doctrine, one some are calling African Sovereignty 2.0, where alliances are chosen and aid comes with fewer visible strings attached. No. Is it without danger? Certainly not. But compared to decades of broken promises, remote drone wars, and predatory extraction disguised as development, it's a defiant choice. And choices change maps. As the desert winds shift, the stakes expand. Mali may be the match, but Nigeria is the powder keg. Whoever anchors Nigeria anchors West Africa. If Abuja fractures, the ripple effect could drown neighboring states. That possibility motivates every external power's gaze. The American playbook traditionally favors influence through clients and agreements. But when those fail, the fallback is often fragmentation, because fragments are easier to manage. Russia's play is to prevent Western dominance, not to govern directly. China prefers contracts and long-term economic dependence. Each power is pursuing its own calculus, and the result leaves ordinary people caught between these competing logics. In resource-rich regions, the pattern repeats: discovery, displacement, violence, and then security arrangements that secure interests but seldom restore communities. Across the Sahel, that's the real pattern beneath all the rhetoric about terrorism. Villages being emptied where minerals lie is not a coincidence, it's a method. Militia fires clear the land. Certificates and contracts follow. Extraction proceeds while people remain displaced or erased. This cycle has played out before in other corners of Africa, and it risks repeating here unless these dynamics are named and resisted. Meanwhile, the Sahel has not been passive. States and communities are adapting. Some have built local defense forces, training volunteers to guard their fields and protect their roads. Intelligence flows from nomads, from traders, from people who know the land better than any satellite. Drones and jets can strike, but they cannot hold trust. Where local defense is organized and rooted in the community, people survive. That's the lesson the West rarely highlights. Western media fixates on coups and failures, while the gritty, improvised tactics that actually keep people alive go unremarked. What's unfolding is historic. For the first time in decades, African actors are asserting doctrines shaped by their own terrain and culture, not by external manuals. The tactics are fast, decentralized, and sometimes ruthless because survival has no patience for ceremony. This isn't a war of abstract ideology. It's a war for existence. People are fighting to protect their tomorrow, not to win medals. If the Sahel's approach sometimes looks severe, it's because the alternatives have been far worse. Still, no model is sustainable without regional unity. Fragmented responses play right into outside hands. That's why collaboration matters, why shared intelligence and joint tactics form a firewall. From Timbuktu to the highlands of the East, the fight is the same. It's not only against armed men, it's against the assumption that Africa cannot protect itself. That assumption dies when locals patrol their own roads and when villagers refuse to be displaced. The moral question remains: are we witnessing a new chapter of autonomy, or just a new form of extraction under a different flag? The answer depends on who writes the contracts, who polices the mines, and who sits at the negotiating tables. If Africans control those levers, sovereignty deepens. If foreign interests are just extracting resources by proxy, the old order persists under new uniforms. So, where does this leave citizens across the region? Caught between guests who don't help clean the house and owners who must reclaim rooms in their own home. Reclaiming their voice means asking hard questions. Who is arming the militias? Who is financing the silence? Who profits when towns burn and pipelines open? Until those questions are answered in parliaments, not just in think tanks, the cycle will continue. The only antidotes are clarity and courage. Nigeria matters because its continuity or its collapse will decide West Africa's trajectory. If it holds, The region can choose a path toward agency. If it fractures, the continent becomes easier to court, bargain with, and control. This game is older than any single troop movement. It's a contest over stories, maps, and memory. External powers fight for dominance. The Sahel fights to survive. That fundamental difference changes how wars are fought on the ground. In faraway capitals, counterterrorism is an industry with doctrines, contractors, and budgets. On the ground, communities improvise survival with radios, dirt maps, and human networks. That improvisation often succeeds where doctrine fails. It's imperfect and costly, but it's born of necessity. If this story of resistance resonates with you, don't let it remain just a commentary. Share it. Talk about the choices African states are making. Demand that resource deals involve the people who live above those resources. Hold leaders accountable not only for security, but for justice. Comment below with your view, subscribe to stay informed, and share this story. Because silence is the very weapon that those who profit from displacement are counting on. This moment isn't just another news bulletin. It is a hinge in history. And Africa is not going quiet. Thanks for watching.